Welcome back to Queen Cup Tarot. All right, tribe. So I am very, very excited to introduce to you Dr. Anjanette Decarlo. Hi, Dr. Anjanette.
Hi, everyone.
So as I mentioned to you guys, I have been working with Dr. Anjanette for a couple of months, as well as her team. Her team has facilitated our connection with Somaliland and Oman to get you guys the best, most sustainable, fairly traded frankincense that I could find. So I wanted to introduce her to the tribe so that she can help us better understand the journey of frankincense, the mission that this tribe is essentially getting involved into. So every single one of you that have purchased a bottle of frankincense is positively contributing to this mission. And Dr. Anjanette is going to talk to us a little bit about, in this episode, her journey, a little bit about her background in mission work as a whole, because she's definitely been helping many missions and working on many different projects internationally for various different things. And I want to start off by, first of all, thanking you, Dr. Anjanette, for coming and introducing yourself to the tribe. We are going to touch on and talk on lots of topics throughout, our relationship, but kind of wanted to start off by introducing you and giving you an opportunity to introduce yourself to the tribe, let them know a little bit about your mission work, who you are, your ascension journey, and a little bit about frankincense. So why don't you introduce yourself to the tribe, let them know a little bit about yourself, and we will take it from there.
Sure. It's so exciting to be here with you, Destiny, and to meet your tribe. It's such an important part of the equation to have the different people who are passionate about using frankincense for smudging, for health or spiritual reasons, to participate in really understanding what's happening with the trees and how to be a part of the solution and how to be a part of positive growth and sustainability in the frankincense industry. And so I'm really happy to be here to work on that with you for the long term and with this entire group of amazing people that have assembled together in Queen Cup. And so today, Destiny, right, we want to talk a little bit about, my personal story and how I got here.
Yes, and a little bit about your humanitarian work and kind of bringing us up to date with that, because I know a lot of the tribe is looking to get into mission and has their heart chakra is open to doing humanitarian work as well. So I really feel that you can support and help inspire the tribe by talking a little bit about how you got into humanitarian work.
Yeah. Okay. Well, so you introduced me already. So, I have a PhD in environmental sciences. But that isn't really what defines me. I had to fight really hard to get that PhD. I was a non-traditional student. I don't come from money. I didn't have privilege. I was older when I got my PhD, and I was a single mom at the time. And so I definitely was not the traditional PhD student, but it was a long-term goal of mine to get a PhD as a woman, as the environmentalist, and someone who loves to learn. And so it certainly was a good idea to do that, but it doesn't define who I am.
Right.
I came to environmentalism as a really young kid. I didn't know you called it environmentalism when I was a kid, or connecting, or any of these things. But really what was going on for me early on was that inside the house and in the family dynamics was not safe. And that outside with the trees and with animals was safe. And so from a really early age, trees and animals became my friends, my family, my sanctuary, my safe space. And I remember very clearly this scene where we had this wild cat. He was pretty wild, and he would go outside and come in, and he scratched me one day. And my dad said, what happened to your arm? And I didn't want the cat to get in trouble, so I said I had gone in the pricker bushes and gotten scratched because I was protecting my animal friends from violence and stuff that was going on inside the household and in the family dynamics. And I couldn't have been more than like 3 or 4 years old protecting the cat from getting in trouble for having scratched me. And that bond with the animals around me, not only cats and dogs, but there were a lot of wild animals in the 70s. There was a lot more wildlife than there is currently. Definitively know that, which is heartbreaking. And so being with trees and being with the critters became, that became my center. So from a very, very young age, that was where my center lied and where I felt safe and also enchanted. Like I still have experiences from being very, very young and being out in the forest behind the house and having these impactful experiences, noticing details in nature. Or one time I came across a dead deer in the forest, and its bones were remaining, its skeleton. And it was so striking to me, this experience of having found a dead animal. And then the curiosity of wanting to check out the bones. And I remember kind of praying over this deer and, wishing it good journey to the next realm. So I love nature, if you can't tell already. It's my inspiration. I mean, people are my inspiration too, and the amazing creations and things that people do inspire me. I'm a little bit of a hybrid in that way. I have some friends who are very reclusive and spend a lot of time doing work in forest ecology, but then interacting with the people isn't so much what they want to do, right? They're like, I don't want to do that. But for me, it's both. I get excited and I love to be around people. I love the interaction with people and also being able to serve and help people. Coming from the background that I did, I was very, very, very aware of suffering. My mom had been abandoned as an infant, and she was raised in a Catholic orphanage, and that didn't go very well for her. She suffered a lot of abuse, and that intergenerational trauma that she suffered and that was passed on to me was very real, along with her own problems that were going on, trying to raise me after she left my dad. And so the struggles of humanity and the struggles of nature are one and the same thing. They're one and the same thing. There's this very odd notion of a disconnect between humans and nature, right? That nature's over here and humans are over here. And yes, we interact with nature, but we're somehow separate from it. And that's not true. And that disconnect robs us of an innate, enchanting, exhilarating experience that when you really spend time with nature, it fills you up. It fills you up. And so does serving others and helping others. I also learned early on that you have to serve yourself, and you have to fill yourself up, and you have to take very good care of yourself so that you can give to others. I mean, that's a really important part of the equation. It took me a while to learn that one.
Right.
Took me a while. I'm 50 years old now, so I've been doing this for a long time. I've started as an environmentalist at a really young age, and an activist, not only environmental activism, but social activism. It really started around 16. And if I really, really go back, my first protest was one of my mother's boyfriends that I didn't like. And and I got my best friend and I were about, I don't know, 9 maybe. We made these signs that said, "Go home, Brian." His name was Brian. Sorry to the Brians out there.
Sorry, Brian.
No, Brian, go home, Brian. And when they pulled in the driveway, we were staging a protest in the living room, walking the this was the 70s, right? So I was growing up in an era of a lot of protesting. And my mother's face, when she saw this, she had the biggest smile and he had the biggest, mad face. And he said, you need to stop her. And she said, she's expressing her freedom of speech. You know, like, this is great. So
I love that.
coming up in that era to protest, to take a stand for something, to have a passion for something, and to believe in something outside of myself that's simultaneously inside myself, is what drives me.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic. Now, how would you say that your love of the environment, your upbringing, the struggles and the trauma that you had experienced as you get out of those younger ages and start to get a little bit older into your teens and 20s, how did this kind of push you into your humanitarian work and your mission work?
Mm. So, suffering a lot of abuse, physical, being neglected, going without, sexual, all those different forms of abuse. I was clearly in a state of empathy and resonating with others. Now, maybe I would have been empathetic not having suffered so much abuse as a child, but I did. And that combination drove me to want to be around other people who had also gone through similar things and to help uplift each other. I wanted to help myself and I wanted to help others. And I knew that somehow in that equation of helping others, that I would be helping myself. You know, that I would be driving a mission that would be self-healing as well as being able to interact and heal others equals healing the environment. Right? Because when people are healthy, when their lives are in balance, they usually will have a good environmental impact. You know, it goes together. Health of the environment and health of people are absolutely linked. You see decline in the environment, you see pollution, you see problems happening in communities of contamination. That's the extreme example of people's health and environmental health are one and the same. So helping myself, helping people, and helping the environment was a mission so that I could have a good life. I also wanted to shake off some of the intergenerational trauma that was passed on to me. I didn't want to take that forward. And I was very keenly aware at a young age that I didn't want to have children, not because I don't love children, but I didn't want to pass on these mental health problems, these trauma, all this. And also as an environmentalist, I was in that stage of, well, there's enough people here on the planet. So my goal was to adopt and to take foster kids, which I went on to do. But I really made a decision not to biologically have children. And it was interesting that a lot of people would just assume that I couldn't. You know, when I had to take my foster son who I adopted became my son. A lot of people assumed I did that because I couldn't have children. That was not the case. It was a choice.
Right.
Yeah. So did I answer that question?
No, you absolutely did. And I just want to make
unpacking it is, please interject as you want me to unpack some of these things.
No, this is fantastic. It's organic. And I just wanted to kind of make a really important statement just that I was downloading as you were talking is a lot of the time, because like I said, there's a lot of people in the tribe that have gone through similar things, but also have a deep rooted need to go into mission and humanitarian work. And I just want to make it clear that the humanitarian work helps with the spiritual journey and ascension, and that you do not have to be at a certain level of ascension and spiritual healing to go into mission work. So, because I feel like a lot of the time people think I'm not prepared or I can't create impact because I have these generational issues I'm still dealing with or whatever the case is. And I think you're a great example of your spiritual growth and development was actually tethered to the work you had been doing from such a young age. It was like, as you were doing your work, it was actually, like you said, healing you simultaneously, which I just wanted to make mention to, because I know we can be very hard on ourselves and set this bar and say, and that can very much be devil energy, that I'm not good enough to get into humanitarianism. I'm not good enough. I can't create impact. right? So I just think that's a beautiful way to kind of present it to the tribe, that your impact, your journey into mission is going to help you further ascend and
Oh
heal. And
yeah.
right.
Yeah. It's a journey. It's not an endpoint.
Yeah.
And in fact, in many cases, people who have suffered a lot and are struggling are people who have the biggest hearts and absolutely understand suffering and want to give. And the other thing that comes out of it is you're not alone, right? So thank goodness this is less of an issue now, right? To be able to present yourself and talk openly about trauma or abuse or things that hold you back, or paradigms that aren't serving you any longer. We're more open now about talking about these kind of things. 20, 30 years ago, if I tried to speak up about sexual assault and rape, it was my fault for what I was wearing. It
Right.
was my fault for being female. It was my fault for being, my mother's daughter. It was whatever it was, right? We are moving into, I know that all still exists, but we are moving into a new period where you can express who you are and find people to work with that you're not alone, and you build each other up. And that's
Absolutely.
real, so part of why I'm taking this leap of faith to start talking more in detail about how I got here is not because I want you to think I'm so cool. It's because I want to inspire you, whoever you are out there, and connect with you, so I'm not alone and I'm in it with you and we're in it together. And when we come together like that, we amplify the potential for
Right.
positive impact. It's out. I mean, one person alone, it's not cool anymore. We don't want just
Right.
the dominant leader who's going to tell us all what to do. And we have to come together in collaborative circles, like in this platform that you're making available for all of us, Destiny, to come together to work towards something as a group. That's so
Right.
empowering. There's so much
Absolutely.
transformative energy that happens in that space. So
Absolutely. Now, can you talk to us just a little bit? Like, I know you've done, your resume is huge. Can you talk to us a little bit about some of the mission work that you have done and what that looks like?
sure. So it's not, I mean, like, it's against my nature to just start rambling off like, oh, I did this, I did this, I did this. It's more like I went on a journey, and I rejected all of the people who said, no, you can't do that, that's too dangerous, that's not going to work out. And I rejected the image of what I was supposed to be or what I was supposed to do. Now, that had been cracked for me after going through so much abuse that I never felt like the mainstream. I never felt normal. Right. So in a way that freed me from confinement of societal norms of what I was supposed to be as a woman. And I did things that people thought were absolutely insane. Like, I graduated high school and I got on a bus and I went to Mexico and traveled around with a backpack for 3 months through Central America to check out different permaculture farms and different sustainable ag projects with really no aim and just going. And you can't do that. Well, yes, you can. If you listen to all the things people tell you you can't do, they're just trapping you in their own problem box. They're trapping you in their own limited paradigm. And in fact, the human potential is greater than we know. Any of us, even me. I mean, we have potential that we don't even understand, right? So what I did was I threw myself into exploring the world and getting to know people in their communities firsthand, just as a person, right? From at the beginning. And then I saw ways to turn that into work. And right around that time in the early 90s, environmentalism became professionalized. And so I landed my first professional job as a professional environmentalist at the Natural Resources Defense Council. It's a very big NGO, still in existence, working on environmental issues. And that gave me a lot of confidence working with that group and being an environmentalist. And I learned that pissing off polluters meant you were doing your job right. Right. So I remember having my first environmental campaign, and the industry came after me, and I was so scared. I got called into the boss's office. I said, "Oh, I'm in trouble." And she pats me on the shoulder and says, "Well done." I said, "But they're so angry." And she said, "Well, then you know you've done your job right."
That's dope. That's fantastic reassurance.
So I worked for many years as an environmentalist. My passion was protection of old growth forests and trees. Trees being my friends, I see trees as beings. Not to sound totally nuts, but I have names for some of the trees around my house, and I interact with them as beings. Hi, how are you? I know it's winter. You're in sleep mode right now. You're not as aware of me as you are in the spring. But I'm going to be here when you wake up in the spring, and talk to them, and silly things like this. I've named some trees after people that I respect. But that was one of the first big environmental campaigns that really captivated not only my spirit, but my drive to protect these trees, these huge old growth trees, these forests that are so important. There was this alarm bell going off in me at a young age of, we're going to lose this. We're going to lose this biodiversity. We're going to lose these old growth trees. And I better get out there and see them and interact with them to try to stop them from being gone, but also to be with them before they are gone. Like I used to have this very,
relationship.
It was this angst of, I want to go meet that tree. I want to be in that forest in British Columbia. I want to go to that old growth forest. It was a drive. And so I did a lot of environmental campaigns on many different topics, as many environmentalists do. And because I came from this very strange background, which now I realize is more strange, my mother, having been such an abuse survivor, felt much more comfortable around people of color and Native American folks than she did around people who were considered normal, or white people who had made it, or people who had it all kind of situations. My mother actually raised me telling me, this might sound odd, that Black people were better than white people because they had suffered so much and they had so much soul and they gave so much passion and art and love. I mean, she'd go through the list of all the things that Black culture have given to the United States. And it was a good thing and a bad thing that she impressed upon me, because in a good way, I was very open to other people. I had no barriers. I wasn't afraid. I grew up around people of color. I spent a lot of my life around people of color. I have my ex-husbands. So I mean, so working in Africa was totally comfortable for me. I was already accustomed and got more accustomed to it there, being the only white person around, being the one that everyone wants to come and touch my hair, or, feel my skin, or, like look at my hand, or, natural human curiosity. Right. What's this? I've even had children who've never seen a white person before see me and cry, like, what's that? It's frightening. What is that? One time I was trying to play with these kids because they were scared of me. And I tried to joke around and kind of like move towards him. And this poor little boy, he was like, and he tried to run away and he tripped and fell. And then I wanted to pick him up, and then he was even more terrified. No. And his mom came, and then we got to know each other. But it's always been very comfortable for me to work in societies that I'm not, represented in that society. I'm different. Right. That's okay with me. I'm okay with that. That doesn't freak me out. It doesn't, And I realize more now, which is weird that it took me this long to realize, that's not norm for a white person. That actually that much exposure growing up, friendships, love affairs, all these different interactions with all different kind of people is not the norm in US society. And that's
Right.
so sad, because it's so sad for so many reasons. There's been so much impact and so much suffering and so many people hurt by this. It also confines white people to being afraid and losing out on friendships and a richness in life that if they were embracing more diversity or around more diversity in their lives would be better for it. I'm so happy now to see that I came from this kind of strange upbringing with my mom coming from an abusive background herself, and resonating more and identifying with people of color, and then passing that on to me. And the way that transmuted for me was, well, I'm comfortable really with anyone, anywhere. Rich people,
Definitely.
poor people, white, black, Muslim, Christian, Jewish. I don't care what you are. I want to know what's in you, and how we can, what can we exchange between us that's going to make my life better, your life better, and the planet's life better. Right. So I get that question a lot. Like, why Africa? I I I wanted to go to the motherland so badly. And in my 20s, when I finally got to go to Ethiopia on a work trip, I got off the plane, I kissed the ground, because I knew I was in the cradle of human evolution. And so those connections for me are very deep. And that's not to say, I mean, I work on things right here. I live in Vermont, which is probably one of the whitest states in the country, in the United States.
Right.
I'm fine. I love the farmers that live right here on the hill. We're so different from each other.
Right.
And we have common ground, and we find it. I love to find that with people. That's one of my favorite things, is to find common ground. So my mission work a lot of it became based in Africa. And so I worked for several years in Sierra Leone, after the very terrible civil war that went on there. I worked with an incredible organization that was based there and doing work. They brought me in as an external advisor. And I worked for a couple of years on post-war reconciliation efforts at the community level, working with child soldiers, former combatants, and integration, and how to bring women and the environment into that for healing. That's a big, long story all behind that. I've worked for many years in Somaliland, Somalia, on the frankincense issue, which is an issue of ecology, but it's also a humanitarian direct issue for people. I worked in Mexico for many years on watershed restoration, and sustainable forest initiatives. I go. It
Now,
goes.
just to ask, because I know there's a lot of people in the tribe, and a lot of people are starting to, especially Black people, are wanting to go back home, whether it's to live, whether it's to do mission work, humanitarian work. I think a lot of the issues in Africa are no longer being glazed over, because it's not just frankincense. We've got gold. There's tons of these, issues. And when you're speaking to the tribe, kind of for light and for shadow, can you give us an idea of what it's like to go into Africa with this heart of humanitarianism, with this idea of wanting to create impact, but the reality surrounding how difficult that is, how possible that is? Because I was watching, there's a lot of content of, African Americans, Canadians going back to Africa and it not being what they thought, which could very much be due to their limited research and understanding. But a lot of people have the good intention of wanting to go and create positive impact, and then kind of getting kind of slapped in the face with this, oh, I can't because of this, that, and the third. So just maybe a little bit about maybe the shadow aspect of going out into Africa and trying to do this work, just so that people aren't discouraged and can kind of get an idea of what that hill looks like. So they say, if I am going to go and create impact and do this in whatever capacity, this is kind of what it's going to look like for me. if that's even something you can possibly, shed light on.
Sure. Well, wow, what a great question. No one's ever asked me that one before. So there is such a power differential between those of us coming from the developed world, regardless of ethnicity,
Right.
with our dollars into a developing country where, and especially for people of color going, to countries in Africa, you're not necessarily immediately accepted as part of the group just based on skin color.
Right.
It's Africa's way too diverse for that. I mean, there's more genetic diversity in DNA in West Africa than like whole parts of the globe. So you have so many different distinct ethnic groups with distinct languages and or subdialects across Africa. There's so much diversity that when you come quote unquote back, you're Canadian, you're American, even if you're a person of color, you're still
Right.
coming from somewhere else. Now, this gets real deep, and I've been in some of these conversations. I mean, I saw the other end of this living in New York City. I'm originally from New York. A lot of my African friends who moved to New York City were heckled or attacked by other African Americans for wearing African clothes or being in with their African accents or their African foods. There's some disconnects there. And I mean, some of that is that internalized self-hatred that was imparted onto people of color as part of slavery and then part of, I mean, these are very intentional, deep seated self-hatred things that were impressed on people. As a female, I can identify with parts of that. Certainly, I still very much recognize that I do have white privilege. I understand that completely. And so, going for anyone, for a white person, a black person, returning, visiting, going to Africa, you're always going to have that differential because of the money issue, the economics of it. With so many people in poverty or struggling, that's going to be difficult to go out into a rural community and just want to help, right? And you're not going to be seen as part of it. Now, there's plenty of contemporary cities in Africa where you'd have peers, Destiny. Like, let's say you wanted to go to Ghana, to go to Accra or to Joburg in South Africa, or I mean, there's, to go to Lagos or places where there's, Western educated, totally understand you, totally understand. And those are the bridge builders I often find, And so I myself, I do work through that type of person who's a bridge builder, who understands my culture coming from the US, my educational background, and understands their country, their folks, their bridges, and they're so critical. So identifying them and or the organizations that have already, worked this through and joining in that formulation is less of a power imbalance economically to have some positive impact.
That would make sense.
So really, even myself, I've gone into communities where I show up and they think in my suitcases is cash, or that, if you, and then there's the people who try to manipulate that or tell the villagers, she's got money in her bags when I don't, and, that she's giving it all to me. And, poverty creates problems. And people who are wanting to help folks who are at a disadvantage, when you're more advantaged, there's a power differentiation. There's a power differential over that economic status. And sometimes educational background or understanding a global worldview. Those folks know their lives. They know their place. They have a lot of knowledge. What they may lack is a global understanding. right? And so that differential sometimes can make people just not have any productivity, can make a person who went from Canada to the United States feel totally disempowered and say, I'm going back to the United States. That makes sense to me. I've had a couple friends who've gone through that. And so I really understand that. And there are ways to work around that, or there's ways to understand that and then to engage, like I said, either through these kind of bridge building folks or organizations who have figured this out. For sure, though, the one thing for sure is that collaboration with traditional knowledge and Western science, when you take both of those knowledge bases with the same mutual respect for each and you put them together, is where I often find the breakthroughs. So finding a way to be able to engage with people who are different than yourself is critical to everyone feeling like it was a positive experience. And so this is where, really understanding cultures and different power differences and things like this are just so critical to being successful.
I think that's a critical thing too, is it's a lot of, I feel like people will come from around the world to go to Africa to create, impact or to do things, but without taking that time to humble themselves and understand the culture from a ground level so that you can really understand exactly how you're going to create that impact and what's the best methods of even doing that, where people will come in and they will be culture shocked. And that culture shock will actually get people to bail. And instead of being open and humbled to it and saying, okay, now I really understand what I was researching or what I was being told or what I understood to be the problem because I'm here in front of it. So with that being said, I kind of want to move into a little bit more about your mission work surrounding frankincense, a little bit how you got into it and where we are to date with regards to the mission.
Yeah. Okay. Before I do that, I want to say, and it's a good segue for that, mission-driven work looks different depending on how people engage with it. Mission-driven work can be business, right? And business can be humanitarian. Socially responsible business endeavors can actually help to lift people up without it being perceived as a handout or even being a handout, right? And there's plenty of African scholars, there's plenty of white scholars who feel like aid and charity haven't worked and they really and hasn't had the impact that people were expecting. And there's people who argue to take more of a business model towards development versus a humanitarian model. And I say, well, how about both at the same time?
Right.
Your business mission and your humanitarian mission are one and the same. And unless we start thinking that way, we're going to really push our planet past a tipping point. Because when you think of this environmentally, it's very obvious, right? Business has to have mission as right in front, not as a second thought or, oh, back here somewhere. Right. It has to be mission-driven business for the environment, because otherwise we know that business and capital and economies can actually completely destroy the environment. Well, same thing with people, right? So I'm not saying I'm against humanitarian work or NGOs. I'm for them. I also am for socially responsible, mission-driven business as part of the development mechanism in Africa, because there's plenty of talented, highly educated African folks who want to do business, who don't want to be, they're not colonized anymore. We're here to do business. We are movers and shakers. We're innovators. We're and that in interacting in a mission-driven business environment can be one of the most effective drivers of development, of sustainable humanitarian development. So I just wanted to interject that.
And I just want to say thank you, Anjanette, for supporting our small business Smudge a Lot to allow us to be a mission-focused business, because these kind of relationships is what's going to ensure that our business is creating the kind of impact that we envision. So thank you. Yeah. Yes, well, let's talk frankincense.
That's the frankincense, right? So that brings us right into the frankincense, because so I did not mean to become, I did not mean this to happen with frankincense. It happened organically. It's something that, has grown over the last 10 years, and it's been an intense period the last 3 or 4 years. Um, but I'm so grateful that I took it on, because frankincense trees are some of the most amazing trees that I know. What they can do, how they can grow in these incredibly hot environments with very little water and very little nutrients. Some of them literally growing right on the rock for their entire lives, never even able to get roots into soil or sand. And then in that kind of environment, to be producing this very complex chemistry. The resin that is produced from frankincense trees has many different chemical compounds in it. The tree is an alchemist. The tree is creating these compounds and doing all of this with very little water, very little nutrients, and sometimes absolutely no soil. That blows me away. And they grow in these regions of the world that are transitional. They're kind of the margins before you get into more there's subtropical forest bands that then transition either in one direction to desert and the other direction to more lush forests. They serve as one of the only resources that many people who live in those marginal environments have. And so the pressure of poverty and the poverty trap for many of the people who harvest frankincense resins is real. In many cases, people who are harvesting the trees, the men who tap and harvest the trees, are oftentimes the poorest of the poor. And that humanitarian issue around income and poverty in the communities is paired with what happens when you start to have a lot of demand for that product with very little governance, with high poverty and high demand. How do you manage those factors to have sustainable and fair frankincense? And so it's one of the most complex issues that, most of the environmental problems we're facing now are extremely complex. Right? That's the reality of where we are now. We have a lot of complexity and lots of reasons why we have the environmental problems that we have. Sometimes the solutions are very simple and straightforward, and solving them sometimes is simpler than understanding the background and the complexity of why we have the problem. But the solutions sometimes are more straightforward. This is one of these situations where mission-driven business is part of the solution, because you have people who are historically, it's been a neo-colonialist situation. And what we mean by that is colonialism is gone, but the supply chain is still being treated as if it was colonized. And why I'm saying that is because until a few years ago, the prices of frankincense for the harvester who's tapping the trees and bringing it in were incredibly low, 50 cents a kilo, $1 a kilo, for incredibly difficult work. You're risking your life doing this kind of work. And so now the prices are more around 5 or 6 due to demand and output. But it's still not translating the way that some of the companies or people would like to see into community results, right? And then we also have this issue of sustainability of the trees and how the trees are being managed in an increased demand scenario so that they're sustainable long term, that the carrying capacity of the trees to give us resins, but then have enough for themselves. Just like tapping maple trees here in the United States, where I live, I'm surrounded by maple tapping. They tap at a certain time of the year for a certain period of time, and then they stop. Because if you go any farther than that, you're going to hurt the tree and the tree's ability to stay healthy and continue giving you maple syrup for a long time to come. Same thing with frankincense. The elders understand this completely. There's elder men who've been tapping frankincense intergenerationally for very long periods of time. now we have a lot of young guys coming online who are taking over their family's inheritance. It's patrilinear, the trees are passed on to men. And these young guys have a little bit less experience. And so working with the newer generation of tree owners and tappers and working on best practices, working on poverty solutions through business and humanitarian, because part of that sometimes might be investing in a well, or investing in an educational center, or investing in tools for tapping or climbing gear, or whatever it is, right? So some of it is humanitarian in nature, but tied to the business. Somalis, for example, are very proud people. My interactions with them have been that not completely trusting of NGOs and or humanitarian work just for the humanitarian work. They much rather do business and have the humanitarian angles attached to that business. Right. And then that's like, oh, it's not a handout. You're not, people are proud. How would you feel if somebody just came in and said, well, I'm going to give you this and this, and you do it, and then you do this? I mean, that's colonialist attitude. The dominator
Absolutely.
attitude,
yeah,
right? The attitude is, hey, here's our vision of what we'd like to be able to do for our markets. What's yours? How do you feel about this? What do you think about? You want to get involved? You want to be a supplier here? Do you want to engage in this long-term commitment? And that's critical. Those kind of relationships are critical in today's market, to start forming much more direct relationships with landowners directly. My dream is that for frankincense harvesters in Somaliland or in some other places to have their own cooperative, to really a Somali cooperative, not one that foreigners try to make for them, because there's been some attempts to do that and they failed. For Somalis to form either through the government or through their tribal, whatever they think is best, to have a cooperative, to be able to understand global trends and to also put them in a position where they're trading more on fair terms. So, boy, I know we're going to go into it in another segment. We're going to talk more about frankincense in particular, but I'm very excited to work with you, Destiny and Queen Cup, and all these amazing people that are here today or in this group. This is a long-term endeavor that we're getting into, to be able to, for you to be able to give to your folks traceable, sustainable frankincense. And that's part of the solution. It's not, don't use frankincense because there's problems in the supply chain. That will cause other problems. Right. The issue is to engage with a mission-driven business with the mission up front, to engage directly as possible with landowners and knowing where your supply is coming from. It's one of the most important pieces in creating sustainability, is to have these relationships and this transparency. And that's really what's missing. A lot of what's happening in the marketplace, we know maybe the area that it's coming from, but we don't know exactly which person's forest farm or which, or exactly. And so that kind of lack of transparency is something that I think we're going to see changing in the years to come. There's going to be a lot.
Very exciting. Yeah. That's very exciting. Well, Dr. Anjanette, I thank you. This is our first episode. It was fantastic. Our next episode will really be surrounded about all the health benefits, very specifically about the trees, the trading, the villages, the mission work there, and also a little bit about the shadow side of what it's like and how we're going to create positive impact tribes. So I thank you for joining us. Anjanette, thank you so much. And we will see you guys for the next episode. Mwah. Keep letting your inner angels live.